Hey, I'm George Ruggiero.
And I'm John Finnegan.
And this is the G and Finn Show, giving you up-to-date info on Ole Miss sports and more from around the country.
Catch us Mondays at noon and Fridays at 6 on 92.1 FM, Rebel Radio. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Finnegan.
And I'm George Ruggiero.
And this is the G and Finn Show, and we're back this lovely Monday afternoon, a crisp 92 degrees the day before October here in Oxford, Mississippi. And coming off of a road trip in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the Ole Miss Rebels defeated 59-31, but we're going to have a little bit of analysis coming up right now. So, George, what stood out to you?
Genuinely, what really impressed me, if there was anything that I can say that impressed me, just was how our wide receiving core looked. Our defense, it seemed like they didn't really come out to play, and that kind of showed through at the beginning of the game, or
And you know what, for me, what was probably most important about this game is we weren't expected to win.
No.
Alabama was favored by more than 30 points. I don't think anyone had any expectations other than an ugly Ole Miss loss. That being said, with Matt Corral still out with his rib injury, Plumlee got his first start. True freshman from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, went into Tuscaloosa, Alabama against one of the best, if not the best, teams in the country. National championship contender year in, year out. And he started to make it work for himself. I think Alabama set the tone early, just 74-yard slant to Devonta Smith for a touchdown, one of his 5.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just stop you for a second. Let's just pause for just a second, and I think we just need to talk about Devonta Smith real quick. He's insane, and he's their third option.
I expected Jerry Jeudy to take this game over. I did not expect someone who I'd barely heard of, someone who wasn't on my mind or on my radar. 5 touchdowns, broke a single-game receiving yards record set by Amari Cooper against an SEC West team. Not a great SEC West team, but that was in conference play, too. This kid is going to be a matchup nightmare, if not just because of his talent, but because your best corners are going to be on guys like Jerry Jeudy. This guy is going to be going up against the second or third best corner on your team, and he's going to eat them alive.
And the thing is, it's the third. He's their third option because they still have Henry Ruggs. He got hurt early in that game. He pulled up with that hamstring, but he came back. Thing is, Smith just created such a big mismatch, and he does this against any team in the country. You can't line him up against a linebacker because they're just going to get burnt speed-wise. You can't put him one-on-one with a safety because that gives him time to create the route and to really develop the run before Tua has to throw the ball.
And you can say things like that about a lot of wide receivers. You can say, oh, they're too big for the corners and they're too fast for the linebackers. This guy's too big for the linebackers and too fast for the corners. He's going to be a matchup nightmare, and I'm glad we're not going to play him again this year.
Oh, God.
So after that 74-yard run on a slant too, they weren't taking a shot here.
On a short route.
They forced a quick 3-and-out for Ole Miss, but on the punt return, we got a little bit of interest real early on special teams. So, we actually... So they forced us to go 3-and-out. We punted. We did not do much at all on that drive. It was run for nothing, incomplete pass. But on the punt return, muffed on the field at the 30-yard line, bounced off a helmet, and returned 30 yards into the end zone by Ole Miss. That was an electric moment. There was something a little bit special in the air just for a minute there. But, George, you want to talk a little bit about the
rule call? Yeah. So, thing is, the rule on that play is if it's truly a muffed punt, then you can return that. However, is it not?
Yeah. So
I thought it was the other way around, where if it's a fumble, you can return it.
Yeah. If it's a fumble, you're able to return it.
Excuse me.
If it's a fumble, you're able to return it. If it's a muffed punt, at least under NCAA rules, it's not this way in the NFL. It's a live ball.
Yeah.
But under NCAA rules, the kick is not over until the receiving team gains possession.
And has positive yardage, if I'm not mistaken, on that one as well.
Exactly. So since the punt returner never attained possession of the football, and he immediately bobbled and dropped it and had it scooped up by Ole Miss, the kick had not ended. Therefore, the kicking team could down it once they gained possession, which they did, but we were unable to advance it. So that touchdown was called back, and Rich Rodriguez ran 7 straight run plays from the 30-yard line, which, that tells you a lot about his offense.
Yeah.
It featured John Rhys Plumlee. I think he ran 3 different QB draws. Scotty punched it in from the 1-yard line. I would have been very upset if we didn't come away with 7 from that drive.
No, but I would have been beside myself, especially when you see the play calling there and the fact that, later in the game you saw, that's when Saban and the Bama defense started to lock down the run a little bit better. Early in the game, that wasn't the case. But thing is, I feel as though if they had established the run in a different way by kind of mixing it up, at least adding in a throwing play there, maybe to a tight end or even just like a quick screen or something to try and open up the passing game, it could have been a little bit different later on in the game.
Yeah, and I think what really gave Ole Miss success in the run game, at least early against Alabama, was the fact that we were featuring backs they did not know a lot about. I mean, our leading rusher was our quarterback, John Rhys Plumlee, who tacked on, I believe, 108 on the ground on several attempts. But Scotty Phillips...
25. I think he had 25 attempts. Yeah,
So,
he
what?
ran a lot.
That's not bad.
No,
And
not at all. But
it's not like he was scrambling. These were designed runs.
Mm-hmm.
He'd extend plays with his feet when he had to, but at least as far as his ground game, Plumlee looks great. We'll touch a little more on that later, but on the ground, he looked great. But I think it was the fact that we were bringing in guys like Ely and Snoop Connor and featuring them a lot more than Scotty Phillips, who had been a true number one and should be the true number one. He was one of the best running backs in the SEC last year, but we barely saw him at all. Only a few touches. His only touchdown was punching it in from the one on this first Ole Miss drive.
yeah, I mean, thing is, when it comes to what they did there with Scotty Phillips, and they used him almost as a change of pace back, like what they had been doing with Ely for the most part, it was interesting because, like you said, I still truly believe that he's one of the better running backs in the SEC. Sure, he might be undersized a bit, but he always turns, he's always grinding for those extra yards. But I really liked what I saw out of Connor.
I mean, I believe
when they started to feature him more, later in the game, in that third quarter and fourth quarter, and I saw 24 out there, I was thinking, wow, they're really running with Connor here. And I liked how they were using two back sets.
Yeah, and
with him and Ely in the backfield at the same time.
we ran a few plays out of 21 personnel, which is 2 men in the backfield and just 1 tight end. I think that could be a very successful formation for Ole Miss to come out in a little more this season. We ran 11 personnel on over 70% of plays in the past few games, but coming out of 21 personnel, that could be something that really takes advantage of the guys we can get in that backfield.
And I think with the 21 there, what I think will be really interesting with that is it depends on which tight end they go with. Because realistically, you could go with Cooley instead of Pellerin, because, I mean, typically it seems like they've been using Pellerin as more of a blocking tight end, and they could split out Cooley with a little bit of, pre-snap motion, split him out, and, I mean, that's essentially 4 wide receivers and 2 in the back.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I don't know how much of the success of this formation, at least against Alabama, I'm not sure how much of it came from just this is the right formation for our guys, this is taking advantage of where we have talent and which guys we have. I don't know if it was so much that or if it was Bama didn't have much film on us running out of 21 personnel just because we haven't been doing it. I think that remains to be seen, but based on what we saw in Tuscaloosa this weekend, I think that's something that Ole Miss needs to explore, and I'm sure it's something Rich Rodriguez is thinking about this week.
I mean, he has to be. I mean, when you're able to put up 31 on Alabama when, this is the same team. Sure, it's a couple weeks later, they've had more time to grow together and gel. But this is a team that struggled against Memphis, struggled against SELA for a time, and even struggled against, they lost to Cal at home. And, I mean, we saw what happened with Cal this weekend. They took a loss at home to Arizona State.
The Pac-12 continuing to devour each other out of the playoff hopes.
Of course. I mean, that happens every year, though.
Of course.
That's nothing new. But for a team that struggled against some other teams that really aren't necessarily the top tier of college football, to put up 31 on literally the top tier, the number one team at this point, after the AP poll, after Clemson played North Carolina to a 1-point game, not a one-score.
And actually, because of how close that North Carolina-Clemson game was, if you didn't watch, it was a 2-minute drill by North Carolina, executed well to bring the score within 1. They were the outmatched team, and I think they made the right call by going for it, but they went for 2. When you're the undermatched team, you want the game to end as soon as possible. You take it to overtime, it's going to be a much more even game, and you're not going to have, you put yourself in a position where one play you score, you win. I think you go for it. Questionable play call, but Clemson barely edges them out, making the stop on that 2-point conversion. And because of that, Alabama up to number 1 in the most recent AP poll.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So if you look at it, Ole Miss put up 31 on the number 1 team in college football. using, that setup.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And 31 points is 31 points against the University of Alabama. That's an offense that, those are offensive numbers that you can win championships with.
Yeah.
That's what Clemson put up when they beat them in the 2016 season. I mean, those are great offensive numbers. I mean, we'll get a little more into detail on why, not that they were garbage time points, but tacking on a couple late against, not Bama's practice squad guys.
No.
So, just a little more chronologically, we made a good stop after that Scotty Phillips punch in. When we get the ball back, 65 yards, just 3 passes.
That Elijah Moore catch down the sideline was something to behold. I mean, it was beautiful.
And that's the reason that Elijah Moore was put on the Biletnikoff Award watch list. I mean,
he's got to be.
DK and AJ both on it, both snubbed. Should have at least been finalists.
Oh,
Winners, I'm not sure, but definitely should have been finalists. But, that's neither here nor there. But, he's an excellent wide receiver. It's wide receiver U for a reason. At least I like to think so. Mm-hmm. So we passed just 3 times, including that great one. Drive wound up ending in a field goal, but we took the lead on Alabama. We scored as many points against Alabama in the first quarter as Ole Miss did against Memphis the first game of the season.
Or against Alabama the last 2 years.
Combined.
Combined, yes. Exactly.
More than that in the first quarter. So, Bama eventually ran away with it as we expected them to, and that was mostly on the back of Tua Tagovailoa and Devonta Smith. Threw for 418 yards, and, Smith, like we said, broke an Alabama receiving yards record. So, it's real tough to win games when their second-string wide receiver can score 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have to wonder, does this Alabama team have the best skill position players in the country, apart from Tagovailoa? Because, I mean, it's not just the wide receivers. I mean, Najee Harris is an incredible running back as well.
Running back, absolutely.
He's fantastic. And the thing is, when you've got, that many weapons and that many options that you can play from, Tagovailoa's got... He had some time. He was under pressure a lot. But the thing is, he also had so many options. I mean, you could split out Najee Harris to be, into a flat or into just a little screen route and then have... You saw this on one of Smith's touchdowns.
Yeah,
Judy is a fantastic blocker.
Yeah, he's just when you have so many weapons, it's immensely challenging to game plan for it. If you've got a team that's super run heavy but weak wide receivers, you can counter that. If you've got a team that's got a mobile quarterback, you can counter that. When you've got a team that can do it all, it's real tough to game plan against. So we've been given a little bit of an optimistic look at how this game went, just because our expectations, I think, were so low.
Yeah.
But a little more pessimistically, one of the things I saw was Plumlee, who I wouldn't say I've been singing his praise, but he's been looking good so far. Mm-hmm. He struggled throwing the ball. I mean, completed less than 50% of his passes for fewer than 150 yards. We put up 31 points, but it wasn't on the back of his arm.
I mean, I'm with you on that one 100%. I definitely think he's got the arm talent. He's got the arm strength. He can put the ball where it needs to be. But the thing is, we just haven't seen that yet consistently or accurately. I mean, he didn't throw any picks. There were no turnovers from him, which I liked. But at the same time, there were so many passes that were just errant. And errant in a way that it's concerning. Either just way too underthrown or just, completely thrown away.
Yeah, that's what I saw as well. A lot of the incompletions, they weren't, pretty well thrown ball, but excellent play by the DB, or the safety drop, came down, or a drop. These were ones that, you'd reasonably expect to be incomplete, if not intercepted. But lucky so far, at least on the turnover front. That being said, he does need to work on his passing game if he wants to be the guy moving forward, which I think eventually he will be. But in the meantime, he was handpicked by Rich Rod to run his brand of offense. He looks like he has the skill set to do so. If he can improve his air game, I think he's going to be the guy for Rich Rod.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think really what you saw from his leg talent can just kind of be summed up in him hurdling an Alabama linebacker. Or
noted Olympic hurdler.
But the thing is, he runs the ball extremely well. He runs it with force. He does not like to go down. He does not go down easily. Sure, he's a quarterback. He's going to run out of bounds if at all possible. He's going to try and get out of that. But, there were plenty of just downfield, put his head down runs that he had that I was really impressed with.
Yeah, and it felt like he had those in his back pocket. He knew where we were going to be at, or where the defense was going to be at, and once they showed him something he liked, he could take advantage of it. That's one thing I was very impressed by, and I think it takes a high football IQ to be making plays like that, and he certainly made them. So that being said, we got Grant Tisdale got a shot. He led a touchdown drive late in the game. I think the sample size is still far too small to say anything of value about him, but he looked fine when he was in.
I'll agree with you on that. I feel like the sample size was too small, but I really did see a lot, or excuse me, compared to the other two quarterbacks that we have, I was very impressed by that ball that he threw for the touchdown.
Yeah, that one was excellent.
It was an excellent throw, and the thing is, it showed me something that I don't see much of out of Corral or Plumlee, and that's just that touch on the ball. It had such a nice arc to it. It was placed perfectly. You see that in glimpses from the other two quarterbacks, but most of the time on a play like that, that's either overthrown or that's like just a bullet trying to weave that in there, when instead it should have been that kind of rainbow style where it just lands in the breadbasket. You know?
And as fun as it is to have a gunslinger quarterback like Ole Miss has had, I mean, guys like Chad Kelly, Jordan Ta'amu, Matt Corral, as fun as that is to have a guy who's going to punch the ball downfield, sometimes you want to be a little more subtle with it, and I think that's what we saw out of that. So we'll get a little bit more. We'll wrap up how we looked at the Ole Miss game. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back at you with the G and Finn Show.
Welcome back, everybody, to the G and Finn Show. We are just about to finish up with our takeaways from the Alabama game this weekend. I think Ole Miss really forced Alabama to stick with it and play all four quarters.
And that's what impressed me with Grant Tisdale is he wasn't going against practice squad guys. There really wasn't garbage time in this game because Saban didn't allow there to be.
No, I mean, thing is, he was out there. Sure, they might have been second or third string, but they weren't guys that just would always come off the bench. On plenty of other, college programs, those would be number one, number two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think the team looked young, which we expected, but they looked promising. They showed flashes of promise, and at the end of the day, good teams win, great teams cover.
We covered that. That's the thing. That's what I called for prior to the game on Friday. I mean, I looked at it. It was a 37.5-point spread. That's a bit ridiculous.
Especially for two divisional opponents.
Exactly. And the thing is, the way that McIntyre's defense had been bending but not really breaking against plenty of teams this season so far, I expected something almost of the same, but I figured that Alabama would just take it with the big plays, and that's realistically what they did.
Yeah, and one thing that I hate that this is a positive takeaway, but we held Bama to under 60.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 2 years, they got more than that. 59 points is embarrassing, even to a team like Alabama, but at least it's not 3 years
60.
in a row. It's not three straight years of 60-point games. And you know what? There's no such thing as a moral victory, but at the end of the day, a really young Ole Miss team showed promise against a championship contender, and that's a step in the right direction. And
I think what kind of has to go with that as well is the fact that both of these are new coordinators as well. These guys are new to the Oxford team, new to the Oxford area. These aren't guys that have been here forever. The only person that's really been here a long-standing period of time is Matt Luke, and that's only been, 2 or 3 years as head coach. It's not like the coordinators and the entire coaching staff has been here working with this squad for more than a year, if that.
So I think that's all we've really got to say about Ole Miss's game in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. We're going to come at you with a little bit of postseason baseball.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for this. I love it. I love it. It's October. Excuse me. It's the last day of September, but it's baseball playoff time. I talked about it a little bit at the end of the show on Friday, but over the weekend everything got wrapped up for the regular season. It's time. It's here. So we've got the 2 wild card games. They're going to be coming up midweek. We've got on Wednesday we have the Tampa Bay Rays playing in Oakland at the Athletics. Oakland is yet to decide on a starting pitcher. Tampa's choosing to go with their all-star pitcher Charlie Morton. He's got a good record. He's been fire all year.
And if you're Tampa Bay, why would you play anyone else?
I mean, the only person else I could see them playing is Glasnow, but he's only been getting maybe 3 innings at the most. They just have an incredible record when he starts off a game. He's just been awesome. The winner of that game goes on to play the Astros in the first round. honestly, just the way that the games have been going and the teams have been playing late in the season, I would definitely go with Tampa to take that, especially on the back of one of the best starting pitchers in the American League this year.
Yeah, and so that's our wild card game for the AL. Over in the National League, Milwaukee will travel to Wisconsin, or
No,
not
Washington.
Wisconsin, Washington. I apologize.
You're good.
That is an 8 o'clock first pitch tomorrow evening.
Yeah, that's Tuesday.
And so who do you see coming out of the wild cards?
So for this one, this is an interesting one for me, specifically with the pitching matchup that they're going with. The Brewers, they've been good all year. They're actually they're starting Brandon Woodruff. He's only a second-year guy. Actually came out of Mississippi State, that's just something interesting. You usually don't see a whole too many SEC players going into MLB, especially if they're not from Vandy.
I mean, you don't see a lot of you don't see as many college players in the MLB.
That's true. Yeah, no, people for baseball usually just get pulled straight out of college. But Woodruff had a great year. Thing is, the matchup that they've got against him, it's Max Scherzer. I don't think there's a question about that for Washington. And just the way that the Washington bats have kind of picked it up with some young guys like Juan Soto and some of the other young players that have come up for them. It's a tough one. I think it's a throw-up, especially because the Brewers have been so good since losing their all-star and pretty much almost MVP candidate, Christian Yelich.
And, yeah, they showed – I didn't expect them to bounce back from that as much as they could have. But, they showed that they can, and, we'll see how this week goes for them. The winner of the Tampa Bay A's game will face the Houston Astros.
Yep.
The winner of the NL wild card matchup will go on to face the Dodgers in LA.
Oh gosh, that and thing is that in itself. I mean, all the teams are good. It's postseason. All these teams are quality teams. Excuse me, but there are a couple of these teams that are remaining. Specifically, the Astros and the Dodgers. Excuse me. They're just buzzsaws.
They're teams that look like they're in a tier of their own. Yes, they're in the. I mean, everyone made it to the postseason. At the end of the day, these are. They're the 10 best teams in baseball, but I see the Dodgers and the Astros as, I see them as a tier of their own.
Exactly.
I'd be surprised to see anyone else in the World Series this year.
That's the thing. The other matchups that we've got going on, other than the potential wild card matchups, we've got the Twins going to the Yankees. Yankees winning home field just with a better record than the Twins.
But the Twins coming away with the most home runs in Major League history this season.
Yeah, it's awesome.
On the final game of the season, number 162, they were tied going into the day. The Yankees hit one early, and the Twins came back and hit two. So, with the way the outfield has just been getting peppered with home runs this year, that was something fun to watch for two teams that knew they were going to the playoffs, and in otherwise meaningless games, at least it gives you a reason to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what my main, talking point going into this specific series is between these two. Both of the lineups have just a ton of power. They both just, if there's anything, in the middle of that strike zone that gets hung out over the plate, I highly doubt that's staying in the park. It's crazy.
Yeah, just a few pitches like that could very well be the difference in those series, or in that series. In the National League, we've got the Cardinals and the Braves. Who do you see coming out of that? Because, quick before we get off the American League, Yankees Twins. Who do you got?
Yankees Twins. I'm gonna have to go with. I'm gonna take the Yankees.
Yeah, I'd take the Yankees as well.
It's a tough pick for me. Being a Rays fan, it is a tough pick to think that the AL East, opponent is going to keep going with that. But the thing is, it's not necessarily that they have as much power because we just saw, or just heard, excuse me, the Twins have more home runs this year. But the thing is, it's the postseason. Defenses decide to clamp up, pitchers start pushing a little bit harder. It's tougher to hit home runs and it's tougher to play the long ball game in the postseason.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
And the game fundamentally changes in the MLB when you get to the postseason. It's really easy to say any given Saturday, any given Sunday for football, but you're playing more than one game, and you go home when you lose too many of them. So I think I see the Yankees coming out of that series as well.
Yep.
I think it's whichever team embraced the next man up mentality more, and this season
That's
I know
all the Yankees have been doing.
I mean they're Yeah, they're the evil empire, and they show consistent success. But with all the injuries they had starters miss
The majority of the season.
hundreds of games in cumulative IL days or IR days. But they embrace that next man up mentality. I think that'll carry them to the ALCS. And then, so yeah, Braves Cardinals. Those aren't two teams I've watched all too much this year, but a lot of people at Ole Miss are going to be watching those games.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's an interesting series for me because, for me, the Cardinals winning the Central in itself is surprising. They weren't a team that, you go into the season and say, and you pick out, they're going to win their league. Sure, they're going to play well, and they always do. That's just, what they do. They're consistent. They pull so much from their farm system, and they just play well. That's not the team that I look at and say, they're going to take it.
They were never a lock.
No.
They were never a lock. They made it happen for themselves, though. So we've got, give me your... Let's do some quick bracket predictions. I've got Yankees over the Twins. I've got Tampa Bay going to face the Astros, beating the Athletics.
Me too.
I'm going to say the Cardinals. I think
wow.
I feel good about the Cardinals this year from all I've seen, which is somewhat minimal, but from what I've seen, I've got a good feeling about that team, and I think they're, not only are they excited to be in the playoffs. I mean, of course, why wouldn't you be? But I think they feel like they've got something to prove, and I think they're going to aim to do that in Atlanta. I'm going to say, man, I don't know if I could go. I don't think I could choose between Milwaukee and Washington. How are you feeling about that one?
They always say to go with the hot hand, and I think that's what the Brewers are going to do. They didn't really slow down too much at the end of the season. They kept playing
they picked
hot.
up, and they stayed at the pace they needed to be at.
To get in. I mean, that's the thing. When Yelich was playing, they weren't in. They weren't even near it. They just went on an incredible run after losing arguably the best player in baseball.
Yeah, they weren't for a very long time. Not only of course, they weren't in the playoffs, but they were barely even, if at all, in the conversation.
No, they realistically weren't. The only conversation around that team at the time was, is Christian Yelich going to win the NL MVP?
Yeah, that was the only reason. I mean, if I'm a fan, that's the only reason I was watching the games for a long time. But for me, World Series, I think the Astros will play the Dodgers, and I think the Astros will take it in 6. That's my prediction. I'm laying it on the line. Wouldn't recommend placing any bets on things I say, especially things I say on air, but that's my prediction so far.
I mean, I'm just looking at this thing in general. It's this year, it's just been so wide open because so many of these teams have shown that they can beat each other. Just look at some of the last games that actually, realistically, 2 games at the end of the season where Tampa beat the Yankees. That essentially got them the wild card spot.
Yeah, that put them in the playoffs against a very, very good team.
And that's the thing. All of these teams realistically can beat each other. So if I'm taking, I'm just going to go through the bracket like you did. I'm taking Tampa to go to play Houston. I'm taking the Yankees over the Twins. As much as it pains me to say it, got to take Houston. And I mean, that's another matchup that's, a couple years in a row. Houston, the Yankees, and the CS. I'm still taking Houston. I mean, just look at that pitching staff. It's insane.
Look, they're 2 excellent teams, but in the regular season, I mean, we saw what both teams' records were. But in playoffs, in the ALCS, I see no reason to bet against the Stros.
I mean, that's
at least against a team like the Yankees that doesn't have... I don't think they have the starting pitching for the playoffs this year.
Neither do I, especially with the injuries that came throughout the season. Paxton got hurt late. He's feeling better now. But Severino missed almost the entire year, and he was supposed to be their ace.
Yeah, that was
Domingo Germán stepped up. He was great this year. But the thing is, the Yankees provide so much run support for their pitchers that their pitchers realistically can go 4 or 5. They have a great bullpen. Their bullpen's incredible. There's no doubt about that. But with the run support that their starting pitching gets, you can just hand it off to the bullpen midway through the game,
and it's all right.
Call it a day. That's a wrap.
It's all right if they let up a few, because the Yankees are going to score some. I think. Yeah. And what do you got going on in the NL?
So for me in the NL, You know what? I'm doing it. I'm going to ride with the hot hand. Milwaukee over Washington. I'm taking it. I'm calling it now. Milwaukee takes that and goes to L.A. I'm actually going to go the opposite of you real quick. Atlanta. I'm very impressed by this Atlanta team. I do think that their starting pitching has let them down a bit this year, but they picked up some solid relief pitchers midway through the season. And I just see too much power from that Atlanta lineup. I mean, between,
Yeah, and that's fair. I can't argue with your logic on it.
So I'm taking Atlanta to take that. I mean, between L.A. and Milwaukee, I got to take L.A. L.A.'s just been incredible this year. And, I mean, the way that I'm looking at L.A. this year, it's both their pitching staff. It's the same way that I'm looking at Houston. Their pitching staff's been incredible, and so is their lineup. I mean, they've won so many walk-offs this year, L.A. has. And look at their pitching staff. Hyunjin Ryu has been incredible. Walker Buehler is their second pitcher. Clayton Kershaw, a multiple Cy Young winner, is their third option. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's I see absolutely no reason to think the Dodgers won't play in the World Series this year.
That's the thing. I'm taking the same thing you, Houston and L.A. At that point, for me, it's a toss-up between those pitching staffs. Both of them have a great top three. I'm going to have to go with Houston on that as well, just because they've got that fourth option that I trust a little bit more than LA's. I mean, Wade Miley, he's essentially a 2-3 guy that's slotting in at their 4 spot, because they also have Verlander, Garrett Cole. Keeping in mind, Garrett Cole led the AL in strikeouts with over 360 this year.
Oh my goodness!
And then they picked up Zach Greinke from the Diamondbacks midway through the season. I don't have anything else to say about that Houston team. The way that they just stacked themselves with their pitching staff, they knew what it would come down to in the postseason, and I just think that they're ready.
Yeah, I think for Houston, the question was setting yourself up for success and getting there. I think now that they're there, I've got them. I've got them all the way. So, you got anything else on baseball?
Only one other thing for baseball really stuck out to me at the end of the season, and that's we now have a new record holder. A new record holder in the state of New York, in the city of New York. The rookie home run record is no longer held by Aaron Judge. The polar bear, the man himself, has done it. I mean, Pete Alonso is just insane. I mean, he won that home run derby against arguably a quote-unquote stronger power hitter, just based on pure power.
And what a home run derby that was!
Oh, that was insane. It was great to watch.
And it was a record-breaking derby. We know the derby doesn't matter, but it can be fun to watch, especially if you've got some sort of stake in one of the guys playing. And of course the format's changed, so it was going to be a record-breaking year sooner or later. But man, that might be the first time I've enjoyed the All-Star break a little more than that portion of the season.
And here's my thing with that whole thing: is a lot of people tell great players, don't go to the home run derby, it messes with your swing. I think Pete Alonso just took that and threw that out the window, because he heated up after the All-Star break. He heated up after that home run derby. He had 53 home runs on the year, and he's a rookie.
That's terrifying.
Just think if he gets better. If he gets any better, we're talking like Royd's era home run records. Like, we're talking Mark McGwire and all them, and Barry Bonds style home runs.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So I think that's all we got on baseball. We're going to get into a little bit of the NFL this past Sunday, and we'll preview our Monday night game right after this. And we're back. We're just going to give you some quick hitters on the NFL this week. The Bengals play the Steelers tonight in Pittsburgh to battle it out for third place in their division, which also features the Browns. I don't have too much to say on that. I think it's going to be ugly and it's boring, and if you respect yourself, you shouldn't watch it.
I agree.
Unless you're a
that will be a bad game.
Yeah, unless you're a Bengals or Steelers fan, then you should also not watch it, but be a little more upset than the rest of us are.
That's fair.
So yesterday, a few decent games.
Yeah, we had some games.
We're not going to talk about all of them. No. Patriots defeated the Bills 16-10. Bills look fine. Yeah. Defense looked stout. Josh Allen looked terrible.
No. Well,
Josh Allen looked terrible, George.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear his stat line?
Sure. He did look bad, though. I mean, didn't he get hurt midway through that game, though? He did. He took a helmet to the head. And I remember McDermott, after the game, was obviously beside himself. He said there's nothing, for that in the game of football. And, I mean, I completely agree with him.
There shouldn't be. And, he was evaluated for a head injury. My current understanding is he's day-to-day. I would expect him to be fine. I would expect him to be practicing by the end of the week.
Yeah.
But we'll get his stat line in just a second. But while we're on the subject of head-to-head injuries, you want to talk a little bit about Vontaze Burfict?
Oh, God. Sure. I mean, I'll be honest. I genuinely believe that when it comes to the dirtiest player in football, I would have to give it to him, hands down. I don't think there's anybody that even compares to the amount of, concussive force given to other players on purpose,
And you know what they say, 10 strikes, you're out. Vontaze,
he should be out. He's out for the season, but he should be done.
Yeah, suspended for the remainder of the season. If the NFL wants to continue either caring or acting like they care about player safety, this is a guy that cannot be in the league.
Just not even with just Oakland, because he plays for Oakland now, which, I mean, there's no surprise then that he's, being a terrible person. But for all the years that he did the exact same thing in Cincinnati, I mean, he's a repeat offender. This is not the first time that a suspension like this has been levied against him. I think they've got to do it. They've got to ban him from the league at this point. As much as I hate to say the league should take away someone's livelihood, I mean, he's putting other people's lives at risk.
Look, it's not like, and I'm generally very pro-player, but a guy like Vontaze Burfict, he had every opportunity in the world and plenty of the talent to be successful at his position and be very successful in the league. If he wants to give people CTE and concussions on a consistent basis, then he can figure out something else to do with his life.
I could see him going to UFC. I'm not sure you're allowed to use your head in UFC, though, but I think that's what he's mostly been proficient with.
Honestly, he's looked like an excellent UFC fighter. Chiefs facing a very good-looking Lions team. They're undefeated going into the weekend. Chiefs rallied late, 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to defeat the Lions 34-30.
Kerryon Johnson looked good that game.
Kerryon Johnson looked great, and he's the only reason my fantasy team scored more than 40 points this week.
Bad week for you?
And Barkley needs to get a little healthier.
Yeah, I got you on that one. I had a decent week. My team was led by LA, the Chargers, at Miami. Austin Eckler still manning that top spot with Melvin Gordon coming back this week. He put up 30 for me. And
we're not going to do too much fantasy today, but one really interesting note is New England defense special teams in standard scoring leagues would be the number 1 wide receiver for points scored. They're looking excellent. A lot of that's due to their competition, but they look excellent so far, and I see no reason not to believe in them. If they're not picked up in your league, they really ought to be. Colts rallied late to avoid getting blown out by the Raiders, but still fell 31-24 in Indianapolis. Chargers blew out the Dolphins because the Dolphins.
Yep, enough said. Same thing, Giants blew out Washington because it's Washington.
Yeah, the worst owner in football, Dan Snyder. Daniel Jones continues to look pretty good. We'll see how he develops, but he looked good.
Yeah.
Browns and Ravens. Ravens tried to keep it tight towards the end.
Nick Chubb.
But the Browns put up 16 in the fourth as well and took them out 40-25 in Baltimore.
I'm not giving any of this to Baker. Nick Chubb.
Yeah, it was all Nick Chubb. Absolutely.
3 touchdowns.
In Houston, Texas, the Panthers had a go-ahead touchdown, or no, two go-ahead field goal, and then one more to keep them away from 3-point lead in the fourth.
Did you see that trick play that Houston tried to run?
I did not.
Hopkins threw a pick.
Oh, I mean, he's no Mohamed Sanu when it comes to his quarterback play.
Yeah, I think as a lot of people would say, oh, that's like a Philly spec. No, he wasn't throwing it to Deshaun Watson. He was just kind of throwing it up towards the end zone, and it just got picked off.
By the way, for a, albeit extremely low minimum of 6 passes, Mohamed Sanu is the highest-rated quarterback in the NFL for a minimum of 6 pass attempts. He has thrown 9 passes, 9 completions, and 4 touchdowns.
Nice.
So, that's always fun to watch when the Falcons can do something interesting, and it was probably the most confused I've ever been when I had him in as my wide receiver, or as my flex a couple years ago, and I saw that he threw a touchdown pass.
You're like, oh, wow.
Probably my biggest surprise of the week, and the reason I'm knocked out of my Pick'em league,
Tampa.
Buccaneers.
The Bucs.
55 points on the Rams, whose defense I started.
Ooh.
Rams dropped their first of the season. A lot of scoring outside of the first quarter, where just the Bucs put up 7. But Winston looked great.
Which is surprising. Thing is, I love Bruce Arians.
He's
I'm
very high on him. I'm very high on him.
I mean, not even from just his time in Arizona, just in general. He's just a great coach. But it's surprising to me that he's getting anything out of Jameis Winston, because I genuinely wrote him off as a bust.
Yeah, I mean, I already have. I don't know if that'll change. But he ate a W this weekend.
Yeah.
Nothing interesting with Seahawks, Cardinals.
Nothing interesting again with Minnesota and Chicago. That was just another blah.
Bears
game.
defense looked great.
They always do.
Yeah, that's fair. Jaguars-Broncos was a pretty good game.
Yeah.
Broncos got out to an early 17-6 lead going into half. Jaguars tacked on 2 touchdowns in the third, and the Broncos couldn't quite get it back, with them putting up 6 and 7 points respectively for a 26-24 Jaguars win.
Yeah, another big
you had
highlight
something quick
came
to
from
say
that
about,
game.
You had something really interesting to say about Gardner Minshew.
Oh, yeah, no, that's exactly what I was getting at. It was just another highlight play. I mean, it's just, when is this kid going to stop? I mean, he had probably one of the most impressive touchdown throws that I've seen so far this season. He broke 4 tackles, had to scramble around the pocket, and then he even broke the pocket, and that's when he got the ball off. I mean, he held onto the ball for 10 seconds before he even got rid of it and still threw it for a touchdown.
His escape was reminiscent to me of the David Tyree helmet catch in the Giants-Patriots Super Bowl in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
And the throw into the end zone, making a play happen, extending the play. For me, that was reminiscent of Johnny Manziel's Heisman-defining touchdown pass.
Oh, yeah. He's just so elusive, and he just does not go down with first contact.
No.
It's incredible to me.
Pure football guy. And the last game, behind 4 field goals by Will Lutz, Saints take down a very good Cowboys team, 12-10. Dallas showed up, Dallas fans showed up. Dallas offense did not. I think that's all we've got for this week on the G and Finn Show.